Hi, my name is Amanda Keller and I'm the Associate Curator of Historic Interiors at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And today I'm taking you on a sneak peek behind the scenes of our new exhibition at Wetherburn's Tavern called Tavern Amusements. There will be two really neat articles about the installation and the different objects that are highlighted throughout the exhibit in our fall issue of Trend and Tradition. So please go and check that out. After you watch the video, go pick up the magazine and you can learn a lot more about this really cool installation. And I hope that once we reopen to the public and Wetherburn's is open, you can come and take a tour with one of our really talented volunteers. Our staff here is really knowledgeable and you can ask lots of really cool questions and learn more about how did people have fun in the 18th century at taverns. So today I am in the public dining room. Now this room would have been where everyone was welcome. So when you came in, this might have been the very first space that you would have encountered. This would have been where there were lots of different tables and chairs where people would be eating and drinking together of all different classes. And what we put here on the table kind of reflects that. So we wanted to show that people could have ordered a bowl of punch. They could have been here drinking, they could have been having beer out of stoneware mugs, they could have been smoking together and playing different games like cards or dice games, specifically games like Hazard, which you would have used a dice cup for. And we have this beautifully turned ivory example made out of elephant ivory that is just gorgeous. And then we have this really great wooden turned one as well. And it's always fun to get objects out of storage and get to display them here at Wetherburn's Tavern. So it's kind of fun to go through storage, select objects for the new installation and put them out. So anyways, drinking would have been a really big thing here and gambling as well, which is why you see the cards and all the dice. And then another big thing would have been not only just consuming punch and beer, but also doing things like drinking games, which people still play drinking games today, but one of the fun things are objects associated with drinking games, such as this puzzle jug that our ceramics curator installed for the exhibit. We have a wonderfully large collection of puzzle jugs, so if you want to see other ones in the collection, you can even go online and look at them online on eMuseum. But they always have really fun sayings, and they kind of challenge the players to try to drink, but stay dry essentially. You had 3 spouts that you could have chose to drink from, and if you pick the right one, you don't end up with drink all over you, but if you pick one of the wrong ones, you end up spilling alcohol all over yourself. So it's kind of a fun game, and you can only imagine what would have happened in this room back in the 18th century. Smoking was also a big diversion that would have happened in a group setting. So we have a brazier here on display with little fun faux pieces of coal, which is just styrofoam covered in black and silver foil. And then pipe tongues as well to be able to pick up the hot coals and light your clay pipe. And snuff boxes and things like that. The other thing that we have in this space is an antique violin. Because I think it's important to mention that music would have been a huge part of tavern amusements. When you think about 18th century fun, having fun in taverns, you would think of music, you would think of dancing, you would think of people getting together and drinking and having fun together, and music was a really big part of that. So I thought installing an instrument like a violin to kind of reflect that was really important. So you could just kind of hear the music in your head, I guess, of somebody fiddling in here. But these are the types of things that could have been happening in the 18th century in a public space like this at Wetherburn's Tavern. All right, we're in the Bull's Head room here at Wetherburn's Tavern, and this would have been a space that would have been rented out privately. So when people showed up to the tavern, if they wanted a little more privacy, they would rent this room and have things, different functions like meetings and dinners in this space. And so what we did today was we tried to show a typical first course of dinner and what these kinds of dinners would have looked like in the 18th century. Now we did have some documentation to work with. There was a man named William Byrd who was one of the wealthiest plantation owners here in Williamsburg, and he often would mention that he would have dinner at Wetherburn's Tavern and he would often eat calf's head. And so that is why for our main course on the table, we have calf's head. Now, we would have had, Henry Wetherburns had a very large enslaved workforce that would have been here working and cooking all of this food for all of the men who were frequenting the tavern. So they were supposed to, they would have been cooking at all times of day, making these types of food possible. And Cav said, we might be a little weirded out seeing that today on a table. It makes an impact when, people visit. They go, wow, what is that? But what I like about it is that people still eat this today in many cultures all around the world. So, a little bit of our 18th century past still very much, relevant to society today. And it would have been a very big delicacy, and I think William Byrd quite liked it because he would dine here frequently and eat it quite often. The other foods that you see are roasted quail on boiled potatoes. So that would have been, accompanying a first course, you typically would have meat and fish as well. So that's why you see also sheep's head fish. And what's great about sheep's head fish is it would have been sourced locally. So we in Williamsburg are right in the middle of two rivers, the York River and the James River, and sheep's head fish are still found there today. So those would have been also cooked and prepared and then put on vegetables typically. So that's why you see the calf's head is on mushrooms, and then you see the fish being put on peas with boiled egg yolks for a fancier garnish to make it, the presentation look really nice. Now the other things that would have been a big part of tavern amusements would have been gambling. And gambling would have been something that very much happened in a space like the Bull's Head Room. So if you come over here, we set up a little table that showed different types of gambling activities that could have happened here. And a big part of that would have been horse racing. Now horse racing wouldn't have happened here in the tavern, but betting on horses would have happened here. So we put out some really neat reproduction prints that we have in the Colonial Williamsburg collection that show the different types of famous racehorses and show their ancestry and their lineage. So this is the type of information that people would use to then help them place bets, just like they do today. Very similar to, the Kentucky Derby and all those big horse races that happen today. Now, you wouldn't think that Williamsburg had its own racetrack, but we did. It wasn't here on Duke of Gloucester Street. It was a little further out on Quarter Path Road. But this would have been a huge diversion for the types of men who were coming here and having fun at Wetherburns Tavern. So we put out a nice big pile of money as if there was some kind of betting or wager about to be placed. And then the other thing we decided to put out are these beautiful cockspurs. It's a box that would have had the fitted cockspurs. There was a set of 12 actually in them. And this is an original box that was made in London by a tradesperson who would have specialized in making these types of objects. Now, we don't really talk about cockfighting a lot today, but it was a huge part of tavern society and would have happened here in Williamsburg quite frequently. They found in sort of a cockpit, a dugout cockpit, so it was a little bit lowered into the ground behind Shields Tavern, just a few doors down. So it's pretty exciting to know that here on Duke of Gloucester Street there were taverns that would have had these types of events organized, and we have evidence of that. So the cockspurs are really something. These are really high-end ones, so they were made out of leather and silver and would have been tied onto the animal's legs to help with the fighting. So this is what we have here in the Bull's Head Room. We really wanted to focus on the types of activities, where these men would have been having, they would have been drinking, placing bets, and eating. We are now in the Great Room, and the Great Room was added on to Wetherburns Tavern right around 1750, and we know that this space was added on specifically for large functions. So things like dancing, Henry Wetherburns had subscription balls in this space. It had a large carpet, we know, from the probate inventory. But we also know that all of these chairs and tables would have been used for even things like lectures. So today, as part of our tavern amusement exhibition, we decided to show a scientific lecture in progress. So there were lecturers that would travel from city to city and show up with their instruments. In this case, we have a beautiful brass telescope on display. We have a globe, and we have an orrery that is just fascinating because it shows all the little planets rotating around the sun. And these are the types of things that had traveling cases that could have very easily been brought to Wetherburns Tavern and shown to people who would have bought tickets to attend the lecture. And we know these events happened because we can read the Virginia Gazette, the local newspaper, and know that these things were actually happening. Now, they were happening because the Enlightenment was such a big thing that was happening all over the world. But here in Virginia, they were very interested, especially in astronomy, and learning more about the planets, different movements of them. The transit of Venus was a really widely discussed thing, as well as comets that were happening that they could see in the sky. And all of this is documented, so it's pretty exciting to be able to set something up here that reflects, people's curiosity. What did they want to know in the 18th century? And part of that was learning more about the natural world. So I think doing this in Wetherburn's Tavern kind of helps tie together, how did people have fun? Well, they learned together. So I really, really love that I could put these objects out here for you all to come and see, hopefully soon.